So a very warm welcome to this very special event, which we've called Education, a Noble Sector, with Professor Thakur T.S. Powdyel, who is an educator by choice, by conviction, and by passion. And he truly believes that education is a noble sector. He believes and has worked much of his life on the concept of gross national happiness, and ethical literacy are all his interests. He was the former Minister of Education in Bhutan, and he refers to himself, and people refer to him as one of the most widely traveled education ministers in the world, because he has a passion for learning of all kinds and travel of all kinds. I have been reading a very special book that he's written on education called My Green School, which traces the journey of his education journey, the way he created it for Bhutan. Okay. And it's been translated into 14 languages. And I very much recommend it to all of you. It's a really beautiful read. He has been a visiting professor and member of several international panels and advisory boards. And he is also the International Guzi Peace Laureate. So we are deeply honored to have you, sir, with us. Thank you so much. And it has been my delight to be able to talk to you so often and discuss with you. And I've learned so much from you already. And now we hope to share it with all the people who are here today. First question. This is in the form of a conversation we're going to have together. So it is truly my honor to have you here, and to our honor as Acropolis. So, sir, you often speak of the fundamental values that define us as human beings. And these values, you have said, give meaning to our life. So what are these fundamental values? Can you talk to us about that?
Oh, thank you so much indeed, Ma'am Zarina. And all of you in the Acropolis, I have to apologize for having to postpone this gathering conversation with all of you from, I thought that 28th of August would be a little better, but today I ended up having 3 sessions, Zoom sessions, and this is the last one. I have to begin with a small correction. I am not the most widely traveled education minister in the world.
Okay.
I am the most foot-traveled education minister in the world. I walked across the country and perhaps being able to discover this beautiful country in such a very close, in fact, way that I'm so grateful for that. And of course, certainly, thank you so much, New Acropolis, for inviting me. New Acropolis, the moment I heard this name, New Acropolis, I recalled the old Acropolis. And I thought maybe there is something very special in the New Acropolis. And I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity to learn more about New Acropolis and what you all do. Certainly, I know that you have done a tremendous amount of work already to rediscover, reaffirm, and re-advance, celebrate the great ideas that come with the Acropolis. And as far as your question goes, ma'am, I think it is such a blessing that we get to be born as human beings. We could have been born in any other form. So many, in fact, different forms, species take, but we have this very special privilege to be born as the human of the species. And in Bhutan, we use the term Milu Rinpoche. Milu Rinpoche. Milu Rinpoche means the precious human being, the precious human being. All life is precious, but human life is the most precious of all. And for me, as the most highly evolved of the species, human beings stand on a slightly different pedestal as opposed to the other beings who also share this beautiful universe, this planet with us, the human of the species. And I feel that just as we have a form that distinguishes us as the human of the species, unlike other beings which have their own forms that distinguish them as they are, but simply having a form, this the architecture of the human body, the human form is one thing, but what are those gifts? What are those blessings, the endowments that come to us that distinguish us as the human of the species? I think we are particularly blessed with the great capacities. We can imagine, we can create, we can wonder, we can marvel, but at the same time, we can also destroy, damage, and create havoc. But that is not what I would actually like to advocate. I feel that the human of the species as we are we okay?
I'll just mute. Don't worry. Please continue.
Is it okay to carry on?
Yes, please.
Right. I was just submitting to this distinguished audience that as the human of the species, we have unique endowments, unique gifts, and unique blessings. We can elevate ourselves to the level of the Buddha, Christ, the prophet, the great beings of the world. But at the same time, we can also degrade us to a very low level of existence. And I feel that one of the very important things, or among the many important things that distinguish us as the human of the species, it is our divinity. It's our divinity, the capacity to be greater, sublimer, more enlightened beings. And that's what we have seen in the march of humanity, in the march of the human race. Our race created the Buddha. Our race created the prophet. Our race created Krishna. Our race created the, the Mahatma Gandhi, Vivekanand, Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, the great scientists, the great writers. And I believe that it is important to honor and to secure and to celebrate that divinity, that special dimension of us that makes us who we are. We can make a distinction between categories of values, such as right and wrong, categories of values such as truth and falsehood, categories of values like good and bad. The ability to make these important ethical, moral distinctions belongs in a unique way to us, the humans. So that is why it is important, I believe, to acknowledge the fact that we have to preserve, we have to honor, and we have to secure this life. I feel very sad when I see people wasting their lives, especially a lot of our young people who, especially today, during these very difficult times, feel that life is no longer worth living. And many of them end their lives prematurely. I think that's a big sin, a crime. This life is for celebration, for preservation, and for honoring. That's why I feel that we have this unique opportunity. We have this unique opportunity to make a difference because we are the human of the species. We can think of those values, ideals. We can aspire to a higher level of actualization. That's what the great Greeks did, the Romans did. The people in the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa civilization did. The Chinese civilization did. All the great civilizations are in fact fruition of those great ideals, those those dreams that human beings were able to dream and elevate themselves to those levels. Those civilizations, those cultures, those discoveries, those inventions, creations in art, music, sculpture, philosophy, literature, language, history, humanities. These are the abilities especially, especially given to the human of the species. And very often we forget that this sacredness of us, the humans, this sacredness, the sanctity, this sublime being that is the human being, we ignore, we forget, and 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 get into habits of mind and action that are not becoming of the human of the species. That's why I feel we owe it to the world. We owe it to our societies, to our institutions, to our nations, and to the world to release those human qualities that make us who we are. And I think it is the human beings who can make the world a more humane place, a more peaceful place, a more beautiful place. If human beings do not do this, who else? Who has the capacities, those important gifts and blessings that the human of the species have, which others don't have? So that's why I think we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the human of the species, our humanity, to our societies, and to the world to, to remember and to assert that divinity, that humanity, and that goodness, that goodwill, the greatness of the human mind, the depth of the human heart, and the goodness of action that human beings are especially endowed with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really very beautiful. And I know we've spoken about Acropolis, and it resonates very deeply with us who study here and who are a part of the culture circle to hear you speak like this. And the whole idea of culture circle, actually, of New Acropolis, at New Acropolis, which is a school of philosophy in search of wisdom, a love for wisdom, is to really capture these, what you said, great ideas are the fruition of great civilizations, are the fruition of great ideas and dreams that humanity has dreamt and aspire to elevate themselves. And I think to give some rebirth to those great ideas of the past, and which are eternal ideas, is an attempt of Acropolis and of the culture circle. So thank you for that beautiful answer.
I'm so happy you do that. Yes.
Yes, we are all blessed to be a part of it, really. So this brings us, in a sense, to our next question, which is the concept of which Bhutan has gifted the world. And I know Sambhu Chetri is here, he is here, you are here. The creation of the concept of gross national happiness. It is an idea that really you have suggested as a country, as a nation, to dream something and to ask humanity and other nations, what is development really for? What is the notion of progress that we should adopt? Could you speak to us on that, please, sir?
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Bhutan and the Bhutanese people, as indeed the world, owe to His Majesty the Fourth King of Bhutan, Gelpa Jigme Singye Wangchuk, a great tribute for conceiving of and proclaiming to the world this unique vision of sustainable, holistic development that he called gross national happiness. It is, this development vision of gross national happiness marks a significant departure from the conventional notion of development measured by gross domestic product. His Majesty was very young when he became king, still in his teens, 16 going on 17. But while his body, his faculties and limbs were young, His Majesty's mind was already very mature and very well developed. That is why we call him the King of Destiny. His Majesty looked around to see as to how the world and governments around the world measured or assessed their progress or development. What was it that they called progress? What was it that they called development? And at the end of the day, he realized that most countries and governments around the world used this unidimensional, highly reductionistic, utilitarian notion of GDP gifted to the world by Simon Kuznets. But he himself knew that GDP would not tell the whole story. GDP tells only a part of the story. And if we want to describe or define development, taking into account only one factor, there is the material factor, the economic factor, the physical factor, would be highly inadequate or unreliable to give us a proper sense of what development is. Because life is so various, life is subtle, it is beautiful, it is multi-layered, multi-dimensional. It has so many facets. And if we only use the economic facet, the material facet, it was going to do a great disservice to the notion of development. That is why His Majesty felt that for Bhutan, even though at that point in time, we were far less developed than we are now economically, it is important to look at development from a much more holistic and a much more sustainable way, and mark a departure from what is conventional around the world as a way of looking at development by using the yardstick of GDP. So unlike the unidimensional economics-based or materials-based measure or assessment of development or progress, by using GDP as a measure, His Majesty felt that we have to broaden the base. We have to use more factors, more variables that take into account our physical needs, but our deepest needs as the human of the species, His Majesty realized, are not necessarily physical or material. The most passionate desire, the most profound yearning of human beings across time and space, from continent to continent, hemisphere to hemisphere, coast to coast, country to country, across time and space, is the achievement of happiness. So, if achievement of happiness is the ultimate and the most cherished dream of all human beings across time and space, we should not reduce the scope of life to be simply economic consumers or producers and consumers of material goods. There are so many non-material, non-economic dimensions that make our life that much more worthwhile, that much more meaningful, and that much more fulfilling. And these non-material, non-economic dimensions, we have to take care of. We have to nurture them. We have to develop them. For example, we are all social beings. Social beings. As social beings, we have this ability to work in teams, to celebrate each other, to celebrate our social values, our sense of belonging, our sense of uniqueness, our ability to form teams, our ability to form friendship, our ability to trust each other, to be honest, to be sincere, our capacity to love, our capacity for solidarity, our capacity to volunteer, our capacity to celebrate moments of joy, as indeed to observe moments of silence in terms of mourning or sorrow. So human beings are so various, so complex, so subtle, and to reduce the scope of our life to simply be measured by a limited, narrow yardstick of GDP would be extremely unfair and unreliable. That's why in a pursuit of gross national happiness, we have as many as 4 different factors or variables that together we call excuse me, pillars. And I'm sure my esteemed members of the audience would know these pillars already. They could be the conditions or environments that support the architecture of gross national happiness, bringing about balanced and equitable socio-economic development. GDP does not bother about equitable or equity or balance. As long as there's production consumption happening anywhere in the world, and as long as it produces revenue and increases the national income, there is progress. It doesn't have to be equitable. It doesn't have to be balanced. It doesn't have to be fair and just. That is GDP. But in GNH, it has to be balanced and equitable. That actually is the aspiration of gross national happiness. But it's only one of the pillars. There's what is called the integrity of our mother nature, the honor that needs to define our relationship between us, the human of the species, and our planet Earth. We are just one microcosm of the big macrocosm that is the universe. This Earth, this planet Earth, home not only to us, the human of the species, but home to an infinite variety of animals and birds and all other life forms, which together share this planet Earth as their home. So to claim that it belongs to us and all the resources are there for us to exploit and use up or abuse is an extremely irresponsible, thoughtless, and mindless attitude of mind. That is why in gross national happiness, honoring the sacredness of Mother Earth, our planet Earth, the soil on the earth on which we walk, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the oxygen that we receive, the sky, the smell and the sights and the sounds that we receive and appreciate, the variety of this planet Earth. All these are important, and we need to honor each other, celebrate each other. And today, when we talk about global warming and climate change, the recent report by the IPCC, released by the United Nations organization, in the language of the Honorable Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, is that it is code red for humanity, code red for humanity. And the big thinkers are trying to limit the growth of carbon dioxide emission to 1.5%. But is that going to be possible without a change in our human behavior, without a sense of responsibility, each one of us doing our part? So that's why in gross national happiness, His Majesty the Fourth King knew some 45 years ago as a young king that a time will come when the world, when humanity would suffer from the scourge of global warming, climate change, mass movements of people from one part of the world to another, snow no longer being intact on a mountain tops. We used to call them the mountains, the Himalayas, the home of the snow. See, but if there is no snow, Will they still be called the Himalayas? Yes. And some countries could be sinking underwater in a very short time if we are not very careful. That's why the conservation of our planet Earth is important. And in my green school, the first element is this understanding of the relationship between us, the human beings, and planet Earth. The third factor, the third variable is our culture, our tradition, our heritage. So very important. This is what makes us who we are. All countries around the world, all communities have their own culture. And what is culture after all? Culture is a manifestation of who we are as a people, as a society, as a nation, as a community. Culture gives us that sense of uniqueness, sense of identity, a sense of belonging, and thereby a sense of integrity and respect. A community without a culture, a society without culture, a nation without a culture would be a valley of dry bones. So culture gives us the nuances of our life, the way we dress ourselves, the way we sing, the way we dance, the way we play, cook our meals, prepare our prepare drinks, our songs and dances, our sports and games, our art and architecture, our values, our outlook, our worldview, our ideals, our hopes, our dreams, our fears, superstitions, who we are as a package. All these, the tangible and the intangible, the manifest and the subtle, the objective and the subjective together make us who we are. And if we lose sight of our culture, a time could come when we could all be a monocultural world. No variety, no beauty, no nuances, no points, no counterpoints. That is why culture is an extremely important part of our gross national happiness vision. And for Bhutan, whether it is our big zongs, the fortresses, our temples, our prayer flags, our homes, our songs, our dances, as indeed those that belong to other cultures are unique and very special. In GDP, the value of culture obtains only in as much as it brings money in, a revenue in. But culture is important as an end in itself because it gives us a sense of who we are. It, it is us. Culture is us. It is our mind, it is our heart, it is our body, it is our spirit, it is our entire self. That is culture. And without that, it'd be difficult to imagine ourselves as belonging to a certain society, a nation, over and above belonging to the family of human beings. And the last important pillar is governance. Governance, the quality of governance. There are governments all around the world, some elected by people, some, in fact, they have been there on their own in ways. And so, but governance cuts across all these other pillars as well. Governance. A lot of unhappiness in the world today stems from bad governance or misgovernance. That is why His Majesty the King was very clear that governance ought to be an instrument of service, instrument of public service. And as far back as 1627, the great Lama Zhabdung Rinpoche said that if a government does not look after the well-being of the people, such a government has got no right to exist. In the same vein, His Majesty the Fourth King felt that governance must be an instrument of service. It must enjoy the trust of the people. It must serve the people. So governance. So, but in GDP, it doesn't matter how the governance is. GDP is just about revenue, more production, more consumption, without regard to the implications on the environment, implications on life, both of humans as well as non-humans, implications on the future sustainability of the human race. So as far as gross national happiness is concerned, it is a vision of holistic sustainable development that takes care of the present generation, but also looks after, makes arrangements for the well-being of future generations. So the gross national happiness is something like the North Star for Bhutan, our North Star. We all need our North Star. Even as individuals, men, women, and children, we need our own North Star to guide our lives. And I'm sure those of you who came to New Acropolis saw New Acropolis as a North Star. Here was an opportunity, here was a medium that would allow you to manifest who you are, just as through you, the New Acropolis manifests its promise and its vision. So for Bhutan, gross national happiness as a departure from the conventional notion of GDP is our vision of holistic sustainable development that takes into account the integrity of our planet Earth, our culture, the need for equity and balance, and good governance. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's really very visionary. It is an ideal world that you were trying to create. And I think the world and all of us have so much to learn from this, that, as you said, I think so beautifully, that life is so subtle, beautiful, and multi-dimensional. Our life is multi-dimensional and cannot be economic driven. It has led to us to where we are today. The GDP approach, the materialistic outlook. And I think this is a beautiful vision created 45 years ago, as you said. Is that accurate? 45 years?
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Indeed.
So thank you very much. It's something that we can all aspire to and dream of. And I think New Acropolis also has similar dreams of a world that is oriented in a different way, oriented not towards chasing a bigger car or a bigger house, but to really understand what is happiness and really ask ourselves, what is it really as a human being that makes us happy? And then to work towards that. So thank you for that. Sir, I'm now going to combine two questions which are deeply related to each other. I'm quoting you now. You have said that today the world has built a large number of schools and universities on an unprecedented scale. And you asked, with all those universities, have we become wiser? Have we become more enlightened? Can education make the world a better place, a more beautiful place? You have asked. And you said that if anything can heal the world, it is education. And you have called it the noble sector. So I'd like you to answer why, and also in relationship to your idea of the green schools, which you created in Bhutan, which you put into place. And you've spoken about our relationship with the cosmos, which you just mentioned as well. And today we so wrongly think that the entire cosmos is for the human being, whereas it is not, okay? It is not ours to use. You said education needs to correct this mindless approach, and we need to heal the broken relationships with ourselves, others, and the earth. So speak to us on why education is, you believe it is the noble sector, and also about green schools. Thanks.
Thank you very much again for this opportunity to speak on something that's very, very dear to my heart, education. I happen to be an educator, as you so very generously mentioned in your introduction, by choice, by conviction and passion. And I'm so grateful that grateful to myself that I made the decision to follow the less trodden path, because at that point in time when I decided to be an educator, Bhutan was just opening up, and one could have joined any ministry, any government department. There were so many opportunities, but even at that point in time, I thought I have to become an educator, because I truly believe in the power of education. Most of the great foundations of our civilization have become rather weak. Our great religious foundations, our spiritual foundations, philosophical foundations, humanistic foundations, our great artistic foundations, ideas and dreams that gave rise to the great civilizations of the world. I thought that those could have actually been our our reasons for strength. But today, in this highly technologizing world, rapidly technologizing world, rapidly materializing world, rapidly industrializing world, there is a mad rush to run ahead of everybody else, get to the last mine as quickly as possible before the others, get to the rainforest before everybody else does, make quick money, succeed in the material world, be as street smart as possible, as clever, as cunning as possible. Education for me is invested with wisdom. It is more than knowledge. There's so much knowledge around in the world today, so much of information, so much of information. There is what I call Faustian science, Faustian technology, but no Faustian music. That's why when you requested us somebody there to play some music, I was so happy and thought that I might also be able to listen to some music. But Faustian science, Faustian knowledge, Faustian technology, but very little of Faustian music. Faustus was an overreacher. Faustus was an overreacher. But there was something redeeming about Faustus. He loved music. He loved music. And music heals. So today, education has come a long, long way from the point when it was called the noble sector. I must be the last soldier standing who still believes that education is and ought to be the noble sector, to heal the broken wounds, to heal this broken world, to bring light, to bring light. I assign education with the responsibility to take us nearer to the truth. T.S. Eliot bemoaned the fact that with all our knowledge leads us nearer to ignorance. All our ignorance leads us nearer to death. Nearer to death, but no nearer to God. Somewhere along the line, the rains started beating us. We have an enormous number of institutions of learning. We set up schools, we set up colleges and universities, training centers, and engage the most highly qualified people in the society, our lecturers, professors, teachers, and collect in those centers of learning the most precious segment of the population, our children, our youth, our young men and women, and invest a lot of money. With all these investments, we ought to be able to expect of education to perform a higher goal, to achieve, to aim for a higher goal, to be a little more sublime, to elevate our children, elevate our minds, our thoughts, elevate the quality of our actions. So for me, education is based on two major principles among many. The first principle is that of hope. It is the principle of hope. And the second principle is the principle of possibility. The world is far from perfect. Life is far from beautiful. Life is far from perfect as well. However, it is still a good world and life is still beautiful. Education today has lost this capacity to hope for a better world. We are using our institutions just to respond to the call of the market, respond to the call of factories and corporations. And the employment market, our factories and corporations, commercial enterprises are not necessarily attuned to the enhancement of human flourishing, human self-actualization. But education has surrendered itself to serve those rather mundane functions. They're important. They give jobs. They make it possible for nations to grow, to develop. But growth again, growth in what ways? Development in what ways? Is it making life better, more beautiful? Is the society becoming more peaceful? Is the world getting more united? So my hope is that with the power of education, we need to understand education truly in its essential role. Education is supposed to be an instrument for human flourishing, societal flourishing, global flourishing. But today we are requiring education to perform a minimalist function, complete the syllabus, get over the year, graduate the students, and distribute certificates and degrees and diplomas. But what happens to the life of these people? What kind of contributions can they make? If education does not do this, I feel no other sector will do it. That's why for me, education is the noble sector. And you made a reference to my green school. My green school is a strategy. My green school is a strategy to reinstate education, to restore education to its core function. That is why, unlike today's systems and today's practices, where education responds by and large only to the claim of the market or the claim of the mind at best, the intellectual claim, the claim of the intellect, the claim of the mind. But human beings are more than the mind. Our scholars, our children, our boys and girls are more than the mind. There's so many other dimensions, as we said earlier on. See, today's education ought to respond. Today's process of teaching, learning ought to respond to the multiple dimensions, the multiple elements that make the life of our children, our learners, our scholars, our teachers, our fellow human beings. So that's why in my green school, there are as many as 8 different claims. My green school honors the claim of our planet Earth. Today, we do not honor our planet Earth. Our planet Earth is an object of exploitation and exploration and consumption, planet Earth. That's why we have these unseasonal rains, unseasonal floods, tsunamis, forest fires, burning millions of hectares of forest, killing and obliterating life in their multiple forms. This is sad. But we have educated countless numbers of people. What have we done? See? What have we done? That's why for me, it is still possible to look to the future, engage our children, young men and women, on the principle of nobility. Arise, arise, awake, and advance along a different path. So my green school, green is a color, but more importantly, it is a metaphor. Green is a metaphor for life. Life in all its multiple forms. So we can have a green school, we can have a green home, a green parliament, green judiciary, green legislature, green executive, green diplomacy, green business, green industries, green planning, green minds, green orientation, green habits of minds, green thoughts, anything that supports life. So education has to support life. Preservation, and celebration of life is the first principle of education. Education must arise and elevate itself to a higher purpose, to a higher level of integrity. We have to ask, what is the level of our integrity in terms of educational offerings, educational programs? We build the curriculum, we build our syllabus, we build schools and institutions. Why do we do that? Just as we ask, why development? Why progress? What is the goal of life? In the same way, we have to ask, what is the goal of education? What is the goal of learning? My green school, celebrating the claims of our planet Earth, claim of our society. We are all social beings. Claim of our culture, claim of ideas, intellectual greenery, claim of academics, the great ideas embedded in our physics, in the sciences, in our mathematics, in our humanities, in our social studies, in music, in IT. All these subjects, history, geography, are loaded with these great ideas, great ideas that have moved humanity, that have moved nations. So in the green school, these eight elements are the minimum responsibility of educational systems, educational practitioners, teachers, and education providers and education receivers. For me, education is twice blessed. It blesses those who give. It also blesses those who receive. Today, we do not talk about education in terms of a blessing, in terms of honoring education, in terms of the noble sector. There's where the rains are beating us, and we have to get to the sunnier side of the street. And education is an important holder of our dreams. It is an important holder of our beliefs, our ideals, and it ought to be able to sail us across to the sunnier side. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I do apologize. My dog is here and he's making a lot of noise.
It's friend to man, friend to humans.
Yes. I think what we've heard today, I really thank you for. It's opened up our minds and our eyes and our hearts and to the idea of a different kind of education. And it deeply again resonates with what we believe at Acropolis, that it has it's about life. We're trying to educate ourselves to live better lives as human beings, oriented in a different way, to see the world in a different way, to even see culture in a different way, to see it as a means of becoming a better human being in order to build a better world. And as you said, maybe then we won't have those catastrophes, and because we'll be more in tune with life, we'll be more in tune with things we can't see and smell and touch, and to resonate with that and to align with that, I think is something that we share very deeply with you. So thank you so much. I now invite this, open up for questions. I'm going to remove the spotlight so we can see the others as well. So the first question Narayan is asking, it is clear that living values is the obligation of our human race. What, according to you, is the reason why curriculum in schools and colleges don't cover this aspect of values?
I think, again, as I mentioned earlier on, our educational offerings are more attuned to the highly utilitarian market, the economic labor market. And our employers, the employers of our graduates, expect our young men and women to be able to do um, an assigned job on day one. So they're expected to deliver. But education is not only about employment, as important as it is. It is not, is more than carving out a career, as important as it is. Education has a bigger purpose, bigger goal. Education without values, education without morality is dangerous. Today, some of the most educated people are, or shall we say, most qualified people are in some of the most destructive activities in the world. So education has to be able to respond to the finer, the sublimer aspects of our life. I think we have been very unfair. I think we have been unfair, very unfair. And as an educator myself, one of my most abiding important concerns has been preservation of the integrity of the learner, the child in front of me, the scholar, the scholar, the student in front of me. The student, the scholar is more than the mind, more than a pupil in my class. This person is a human being, endowed with them so many multiple dimensions and gifts. I have to take the whole person. I cannot take this child only as a potential future employee, as a potential future builder, as a potential future revenue earner. That will be such a reductionistic and unfair, minimalist approach as an educator. I have to take the whole child. And when I look at education systems, they have to respond to the deeper urgings, the deeper yearnings, the deeper impulses of humanity, the deeper impulses of our society, the deeper impulses of our nations. Education has got to concern itself with them. These intangibles, even as they have to respond to something as tangible as the market or the employment agency. Education ought to discover, in fact, rediscover its role and invest it with them some integrity, some purpose, and some saving grace. Today, unfortunately, talking about values, talking about spirituality, talking about ethics could be a taboo because everybody's waiting to complete the course and run to find a job. And we have also been very unfair to our young people by saying that you have to be smart, you have to be clever, otherwise you'll get left behind. Very few people would say you have to be good, you have to be a good human being, you have to honor your own divinity, your humanity. You have to be responsible to the higher call of the society, of the nation, and of Mother Earth. So it is extremely unfortunate that today it is the old, the it is the old, or perhaps a more reductionistic impulse of the market that calls the tune. And very often our institutions and our graduates are asked to be employable, asked to be marketable. Look at the terms. Asked to be sellable. And how much more undignified could the terms be to talk about human beings? But this is the language of the market, the market metaphors. Sellable graduates, employable graduates, marketable graduates. They no longer are human beings. I feel this is such a reductionistic and narrow view of the world. Education must open up. It must elevate. I want the employing agencies to fit the sublimity of the noble sector. rather than always asking our institutions and young people to fit the demands of the cutthroat competition of the labor market.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Perhaps if we are winding up now, I would like to
Yes.
say that just as you have come to the new Acropolis, the new Acropolis comes to you. It comes to you. You come to the new Acropolis with your dreams, with your values, with your ideals, with your hopes to build a better world. Acropolis needs you. But just as you need the Acropolis needs you. You illuminate each other. I call this mutual illumination. So together, you discover each other, you advance each other, celebrate each other, and enable each other to flourish and succeed. So once again, to you, Ma'am Zarina, and everybody in the new Acropolis, I would like to say what a great joy it's been for me to be able to meet all of you and learn from all of you. It's been so humbling and at the same time, deeply inspiring. Do take care, and I wish you all the very best as you take the new Acropolis to greater heights. Tashidili and Dhanyabad.
Thank you so much, sir. That was beautiful. I'm so sorry that we cannot answer all your questions, but I think Khushbu has a beautiful question and Narayan has one more, which is about politics. And Khushbu has, how can we make the education system better? And I think in a way you've answered that, because you've said that there is a need to pause and reflect and ask the question, why? Why am I doing? Why? Start asking the question, why? What is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of politics? What is the purpose of a nation? And you so also beautifully said that a nation needs a North Star to follow. What is that North Star? So if the nation's North Star is GDP, then all institutions will be aligned with that ideal. But if it is GNH, gross national happiness, for example, with a wider, more holistic definition of life, acknowledging the multi-dimensional aspects of life, the intangible aspects of life, the mutual respect and harmony and balance of life, then even education will follow that. All institutions will follow from that. So I really deeply thank you. And Sakina has also written something very beautiful on the chat, which I'll just read so that we can complete.
But if there are some questions, I will be happy to respond to those.
Okay, so we will close. So whoever
if
wishes to leave may leave. And
Great.
certainly the rest, whoever wishes to ask, maybe one question, maybe we can take 5 minutes more of your time. But thank you so much, sir. And thank all of you for attending this beautiful session. Thank you.